This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, there were two boils in Jefferson Parish this week. One was the advisories about heating the water due to a system failure, and the other was people's temper as the advisories continued. In Orleans Parish, the heat is rising too about possible increases in property tax and drainage fees. We'll be looking at these stories tonight, as well as what to expect from the Port Nola project and the concerns in St. Bernard Parish. We'll also look at the complex estate settlement of auto dealer Ray Brandt and who's involved, including Gayle Benson's dealerships. We'll begin, though, by remembering the career of former Orleans Parish District Attorney Harry Connick, who died this week. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Tony McAuley, staff writer for the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and also from the Picayune and Advocate, Ben Myers, who covers New Orleans City Hall, and Blake Patterson, who covers Jefferson Parish politics. First, we go over to E to talk about Harry Connick Sr., longtime DA in Orleans.
Oh yeah, like
Parish.
30 years as DA. A man who dominated politics was so important. There's a lot of opinions out there about him. I just wanted to show this morning's Picayune. I thought the headline was a good one. It was a headline I think originated really with Charlie Foti, who's a former sheriff, but he was a man of his time. Long-serving and hard-charging district attorney, died at 93. And I think that man of his time is a well-chosen phrase because during his time, the attitudes and what's procedures changed. And in many ways, he was a highly praised district attorney for being a hard-hitting district attorney, very aggressive. He was also criticized, as was his office, for withholding evidence. There were several different cases of that. Throughout his case. In a Supreme Court case, Justice Ginsburg even attacked him personally, criticized him for that. And toward the end of his career, he had a federal indictment for a related case. He was acquitted, and so he kind of faced all sides right there. But he was always reelected. He was DAs at the time had 6-year terms, and he had 5 6-year terms. He was elected following Jim Garrison, who had early in his career, been a very, very popular district attorney because he was going out to Bourbon Street and chasing the gangsters out and people like that kind of thing. But towards the end, when Garrison got caught up with the whole Kennedy, with the John Kennedy thing, his appreciation started to wane and he became more vulnerable and people wanted another district attorney. And Conick was the kind of guy. Mark Morial, who was a supporter of Conick, who liked Conick, was quoted as describing Connick as the last of the Irish Catholic politicians. And I think it's an interesting point because originally the Irish settlement in New Orleans was in the Irish Channel. Gradually it moved out into the suburbs and into Lakeview. And there was for a while a very established Irish Catholic group of politicians coming out of Lakeview. Mike O'Keefe, Harry Connick, Jimmy Fitzmaurice, Jim McKay. And so that was a breeding ground for the Irish Catholics. And they became really very, it's not like they were a machine or anything, but they were a political base. The FDA, speaking of Catholics, I think an issue that was very hard for him, as it was for district attorneys around the country, it was around his time that all the charges about priests and priest sexuality started to develop. And the first one was a case involving a former priest called Dino Chanel, who had a lot of pornography. And people asked Connick, well, why didn't he hit harder? Why didn't he hit harder? And he said, well, I didn't want to embarrass the Catholic Church. People wouldn't say that anymore, okay? Okay, but at that time, there was no precedent about how to deal with it, especially dealing with the church. I mean, the church was such an institution. And so I think that would have been a type of issue he'd have had to develop in his own mind, and it was a very tortuous sort of issue. But looking back, I mean, especially for that federal case, which really didn't go very far. I mean, I think he had a reputation as a decent man and a fair man. But the other interesting point about him was going back to the Lakeview thing. I remember one time he was running for re-election, and he was having a campaign rally at some place in Lakeview, and people were saying, "Hey, you got to hear this kid. He's got this kid playing," and they had this little kid, playing the electronic piano. And of course, that was who we know as Harry Connick Jr.
Right.
But that was the centerpiece of his campaign right there, having little Harry there and doing sort of things. He himself played the piano. And if you know the steak knife restaurant on Harrison Avenue, there'd be plenty of times you can go in the back room. And there was the district attorney who was playing the piano, and there was obviously an affection for music because he and his wife Anita operated a restaurant store called the Circle A or Studio A record shop, and so they were in music all kinds of ways. And then later in his career, I mean, as Harry Connick Jr. became a big star, and Harry Connick Sr. was kind of retiring, they were instrumental in starting the crew of Orpheus, which had a musical theme. So if you look back at his career, I think it was one where he was never king, but he was probably Grand Marshal forever, throughout that career.
Definitely. I mean, he had a very, very long, full life. And of course, the Connicks are still in politics. DA in Jefferson Parish is Paul Connick, and also
That's right, yeah.
the Connick in the legislature, in the Louisiana legislature. But Harry Connick was quite the law and order guy.
Yeah.
And DA, and a real power broker in
Yeah.
the city of New Orleans for quite a long time. So we offer our sincere condolences to his family, to his wife Londa, and of course his children and grandchildren. But he'll be remembered, that's for sure. Thanks, E. Real good remembrance of him. Thanks a lot. Okay, we're going to go over to Blake right now, because something that people remember all too clearly right now, because it's not too in the far distant past, is water problems in Jefferson Parish. Water main broke, and whoa, what trouble that caused.
Right, that's right. On Tuesday on Jefferson Highway, the asphalt started buckling under the ground and from underneath, and it turns out there was a water main, a really critical water main that the bottom sort of collapsed out of it. So this has caused, a boil water advisory, caused the parish to shut down the entire water system on the East Bank for a couple hours. And it really happened at really the worst spot it could have happened in the whole water distribution system. It was right in front of the East Bank water treatment plant. This is sort of where all the water comes out and gets distributed. Crews worked through the night on Tuesday. They ended up turning off the water at night, which, kind of annoyed some people, but Parish President Cynthia Lee Shang said that was the right move to really get it fixed quickly. And by Wednesday morning, they had replaced the pipe and started, putting the street back together. Of course, the boil water advisory took some time because you have to wait 24 hours before you can culture the samples and check for bacteria. So all in all, on Wednesday, schools on the East Bank, both public and parochial, were closed, and on Thursday they were also closed. And it really affected businesses too. I mean, there were a lot of businesses that were closed, a lot of restaurants and cafes who couldn't open up, and yeah, it's certainly not, caused some inconvenience for sure.
I can tell you about Wednesday, it was deadly along Veterans Boulevard. I mean, nothing was open, and even like the burger places or anywhere you go, anybody that touched water, they just couldn't be open that day. And so it was like when a hurricane's coming, when everybody starts to abandon it. But
There was some business. I mean, there were businesses that did manage to stay open, but it was really inconvenient, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So it was 48 hours. It was a 48 hours incident. It happened on Tuesday. By Tuesday night, or perhaps early Wednesday morning, the pipe was repaired. Yeah, I live in Jefferson Parish. A lot of us didn't even know the water had been turned off. The parish had actually turned the water off throughout all of East Jefferson, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And the water pressure slowly built up on Wednesday. And what's interesting about this is the parish president, Cynthia Lee Shang, was sort of saying, this wasn't a surprise necessarily. They knew that this pipe needed to be replaced. In fact, it was part of a plan they have to overhaul their, antiquated water system. I mean, most of the pipes in Jefferson Parish were laid down in the 50s and 60s. This pipe, they estimate, was laid in the 1940s. So, an 80-year-old pipe here. And to sort of address this problem, the Parish Council in 2021 approved a rate increase. So over the next 20 years, ratepayers in Jefferson Parish, businesses and homeowners will see their water and sewage bills sort of gradually increase. And this is supposed to raise, over that period, $2.3 billion to replace and upgrade the water and sewer system. At the moment, the parish has bonded out $300 million to get started right away, and the parish president said about 70 of those projects are currently in the design phase, and hopefully some will break ground later this year. So the parish has a plan to sort of make sure this doesn't happen again, but you know, as she said, these breaks happen every day. And in fact, yesterday there was another break on Thursday on Jefferson Highway that freaked some people out, but a less critical pipe.
Yeah.
Is the East Bank more susceptible than the West Bank, or is the weather service on the West Bank newer? Or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not so certain. I imagine the investments are spread out across the parish, so, you know, to get the buy-in from all the parish council members. But yeah, I mean, the East Bank, you know, it's developed earlier. So
Right, like the pipe that went was like in the 1940s or so.
That's
so,
right, yeah.
So the parish, the council then, and you know, the president of the council, President Sheng, has recognized the fact that this is infrastructure that needs to be tended to. This is aging infrastructure. We've got to do something about it. So Jefferson Parish residents are going to be paying a little bit more incrementally, right?
Yeah, incrementally. And in fact, it might be a little bit of a shock, but you know, because the bills in Jefferson Parish are on every 2 months.
Right.
So you know, you'll start seeing, you know, your increase. It came in January, so you'll start seeing it this year if you live in Jefferson Parish. I think they estimate the average ratepayer will pay about $13 more this year. So, and that doesn't include new recycling contract that's coming down the pike too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All prices going up. Okay,
right.
Blake, and we have water, so I'm glad about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did have water. The pressure was up actually by what, Wednesday? The water pressure was there. You just had to keep boiling the water.
That's right. They had to have that time period to make sure it was still safe.
Right.
And it takes 24 hours.
Right.
So.
All right. Thanks a lot, Blake. All right, Tony, over to you. The Ray Brandt auto dealerships and his whole estate, of course, has been, you know, something that the public has been hearing about, the controversies that have existed, you know, between family members, et cetera, and then finally, you know, some agreement perhaps between them. But it now seems that they want to liquidate these auto dealerships. Is that right? They've worked a deal to do that?
Yeah, that's right. The little bit of background on it was the Ray Brandt, who started from humble beginnings and like a few people in the region, built up quite an empire through car dealerships, starting with a Datsun in the 70s. He died 3 years ago, and it was a very contentious, you know, battle over the will between his widow and the grandchildren that he had adopted, her grandchildren that he had adopted. So after a long 2 years of sort of bitter dispute, they reached a settlement, the terms of which were not disclosed about 2 years ago, or sorry, at the beginning of last year. And basically it was decided the best way to resolve that was to sell off the car empire and all the other assets he's got, which included the restaurant Pascal's Manali. So the car world is kind of weird. You can't just sell them. You have to go through a very lengthy, complicated process. So what we reported about a week or so ago was that the deal that they've reached amongst themselves was to split the car dealerships, the 14 car dealerships and a handful of collision centers, between two of the big groups around here. One is Gayle Benson's, what's left of the Benson auto dealership that once was a huge empire, obviously under Tom Benson, and Troy Duhan's still quite considerable premier auto group. The catch is, big catch, is that they can agree to that deal, but then it's up to all of the car makers, and there's quite a few involved. There's Toyota, there's Mercedes, there's Porsche, there's Chrysler, you know, all most of the names that you think of, Kia and so on, Jeep. They all have to sign off. They have a right of first refusal, and they can decide to accept the deal, or they can bring in their own folks for various kinds of reasons. So, what I gather is that the people involved, none of whom want to go on the record because they're all under confidentiality agreements, are very, you know, walking on eggshells and hoping that the deal goes through. and that the two parties can go their separate ways, and that the two groups can, expand their auto groups considerably in the case of Benson, with a new Toyota on Veterans and a new Mercedes and Porsche. But they have until I think March is when they expect the auto groups to the period for them to kind of review it to run out and for them to decide. But they could very well scupper the deal, if they decide that they want to have other buyers and.
So Ray Brandt really did have a very large empire of auto dealerships.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the people who spoke to me off the record, who is a finance, person who's very familiar with finance but not familiar with auto, said he was shocked at how profitable some of these are. They vary quite a bit between the different brands. Toyota is highly sought after, much more profitable. Mercedes too. Something like the Chryslers are less so. But the average for a dealership nationally is around profits is around $3 million a year. It can be quite a lot more for the more sought after brands. So his whole empire, including the land, which is kind of a separate deal they're going to do, kind of an option to buy later. The whole thing is worth around $300 million, or about $270 million. It's the greater part of his $300 million estate.
And so the Benson dealerships, they did shrink a bit because they sold off.
Shrunk a lot, yeah. They sold most of them previously. He had, I think, around 30 dealerships at one point, but all of the Texan ones went, so they're down to 4.
Okay. So at this point, those who are involved with the deal that you've talked to feel positive about it, but still not quite 100%.
Oh, I'd say they feel very shaky about it because they know that the car dealerships often decide that for one reason or another they want to go with another buyer. They have right of first refusal, so it's kind of,
We'll see. Big deal, though. Big deal. One. Real big one. Okay, thanks a lot, Tony. All right, Ben, over to you. Orleans Parish property owners, they're probably going to be facing a hike in their property taxes?
Most will, or many will, I should say. Some may actually see them go down. So to back up quickly, the quadrennial citywide reassessment resulted in an average 18% increase in property assessments. As a result, and some public outcry, city political leadership all vowed and held to their vow to roll back the millages that make up the overall tax rate. The exception being the largest taxing body in the parish, which is the Orleans Parish School Board, which maintained the rate, thereby getting more revenue from the increased assessments. Now, it should be noted that their justification for doing that, they say that the state funding formula for the schools automatically, in some fashion, it's very complicated, will result in less funding for them because the assessments went up automatically.
Because the property assessments went up.
Right.
So they say the state will give them, the schools less money.
That's right. So they say that they need to roll forward because of that. Now, it irked almost every other politician in the city and certainly many homeowners, but that's their justification for it.
Right. I mean, when these assessments came out, these new assessments, and they were higher, which carries with it good news too, because your property's valued more for more money, but you're going to have a bigger tax bill. Everyone was quick to say, well, wait, maybe not. Your tax bill may not go up. This is, the city administration and the city council urging these agencies not to roll forward. But we see that's not the case necessarily.
Well, as a result of all of the other millages being rolled back, the overall tax rate actually is decreasing by 9%. So there will be some property owners who will either just be flat or see lower tax bills. It just depends by how much your assessment actually increased.
Okay, another issue of money and fees is what they call the stormwater fee, and this is from the Sewage and Water Board. So what does this mean? How much could it be?
Okay.
How is it going to be determined?
Well, that's all to be figured out. A stormwater fee has been discussed in New Orleans for decades, and it's just never taken off. Instead, they rely on property taxes, the millages. They are preparing to propose a possible drainage fee in the next couple of months, but officials are very quick to note that this will be all very deliberate. It'll be a long process. Voters will have final say whether they want to do it, and even before that, council members will be responsible for the final ballot measure that voters will consider.
So how does this differ from the property tax millage?
In one key respect, and this will be a huge selling point, the property tax millage is only paid by non-exempt property owners. So all of the nonprofits and religious institutions, Tulane University, government agencies, they don't pay property taxes. So the argument that will be made is that this is a fee, a user fee, is a more equitable way of paying for drainage, which, to be fair, really needs some funding. We've got major critical issues with the drainage system that need to be taken care of.
Right. You know, the aging system, just like in Jefferson Parish, Orleans probably older, definitely has a lot of problems that need to be addressed. So with this fee, then, the idea is it would be more widely distributed. Well, you know, the burden, the payment burden of it would be widely distributed throughout the area.
That's the concept. Now, there's a lot to be worked out. I don't know. We don't know like what, how much money they're going to try to raise exactly per se. I mean, they say they have a $1 billion backlog, but we don't know if they're going to try to raise $1 billion through it. We don't know how it's going to be structured.
Right. And how they're going to determine what the fee will be.
Right.
Per property.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those details are all to come. And again, they stress that voters are going to have final say over this. So we're not going to shove it down your throat.
Okay, we're going to be hearing more about this, right?
Yes,
Coming
over the
up
course of the
fairly
next
soon?
year and longer. Yeah.
Okay, doke.
Yeah.
All right, Ben, thanks a lot. Tony, we're going to wrap up the discussion with you because there's been some real controversy in St. Bernard. Some St. Bernard residents really oppose this new proposal that Port Nola has to build a terminal down there by the St. Bernard port. So give us the status of it now.
Well, there's a lot of momentum behind this Louisiana International Terminal, they call it. It's Port Nola's downstream container terminal, which they have to build because ships have been getting a lot bigger. More and more of the world's trade is going on those container ships, and the bigger ships can't go up past the Crescent City connection to the Napoleon Avenue terminal. So this has been talked about for many, many years. They originally looked at various other sites, including Moreau, and decided several years ago, 3 years ago, to buy some land and do a deal with the Port of St. Bernard to locate it at Violet. So they immediately got residents there up in arms because of what they feel will be a massive change to their way of life in many, many ways. I mean, if any major port around the country causes disruption in its locale, especially the kind of size that they ultimately expect this to be. So they've been opposed to it. Not everybody there. There's some people there. The economic development folks in St. Bernard, as well as everywhere else in the state.
And yeah, statewide
really
too.
wants
There's
to see
support.
this.
Yeah.
Statewide, it's got full support. Both Senators Kennedy and Cassidy have come out in support of this. Cassidy was behind the $226 million that they just got in federal money, which is one of the biggest of the infrastructure grants. Transportation grants that have been awarded, and that's on top of a $74 million grant from another federal program they got a month ago. So that's $300 million, which on top of all the other money they've been gathering together with private investment as well. They've almost fully funded the $1.8 billion that they need to build that thing out. So what they need to do now is to get over the Army Corps of Engineers permits, to make sure that they can, do that in an environmentally sound way. And then particularly the road, a new road out of there, which they need to build, which would connect that terminal directly up to the highway system at Interstate 510. That would alleviate a lot of the concerns of the St. Bernard residents, because there are two already clogged arteries, just two highways that come in and out of there that anybody who goes up and down there knows could not handle much additional traffic, never mind the huge traffic increase that would come from that.
So that road is really important.
I think it's essential. I think if they get that, I mean, I think they're pretty well along the way. They're studying it with the regional transport planning folks. And they've got money allocated for that, so I think everybody, and there's so much momentum behind it, it'd be difficult to see how it wouldn't get built,
So the opponents also say, well, wait, why build it here? Why not do this, more downriver? Then the ships would have less distance to cover to be unloaded. So why not?
Well, that's the St. Bernard opponents, the residents, just came out with a study that the parish commissioned from a long-serving, a veteran expert of these things, who said that he said various things, that it might be dangerous to be located in Violet, that it would be better served downriver. But the port and its backers, including river safety experts, said that they dismissed all of that. They said building it further down, you wouldn't have the infrastructure, the road rail infrastructure that you would need, and there are no real safety issues. And also further down, you'd have much more exposure to harsh weather, hurricanes.
And isn't this all
Storm
tied
surge.
in also with the cruise ships? Aren't they part of the big picture? And that's a growing industry.
I mean, it's just dwarfed by the amount of commerce that we're talking about with the
container terminal
container
here. And so
terminals.
this would be right there, built at the current St. Bernard port, just expanded there? Is that the area around that
They
area?
built it. Yeah, it's at that location, but
Okay.
I mean, it's a huge project built from scratch. And I don't know if you wanted to
right.
talk about St. Plaquemines, but there is a rival one, but it's really been pie in the sky really for quite a few.
So are the opponents going to try to stop this in court? Or has something been filed already on that?
They've had court battles
Yeah.
that they've lost. They're appealing,
Okay.
but basically what the court said was wait until you're too early. Wait until the environmental studies
Okay.
come in.
All right, all righty. Other stories. E, over to you.
Opening almost right now is a new boutique hotel called the Rubenstein Hotel. It's called the Rubenstein Hotel on St. Charles Avenue. If you know where Rubenstein store is, and it's a consortium of 6 buildings around it they've put together. Joe Yeager is part of it. It's a boutique hotel. It's supposed to be very elegant. And you're starting to see this in a lot of cities now. They got these older buildings. They're not quite sure what to do with them. And so why not make it a boutique hotel?
Okay.
And that's a good crowd you want to bring to you downtown anyway.
All right. Over to you, Tony.
We just did a story on another of these huge projects, which is the River District today, which, again, like the downstream terminal, has a lot of backing from a lot of people, but they've run into trouble with the first project they want to do is a Shell office building, Shell headquarters, and the developers for that wanted, they actually got the city council to pass a $21.6 million pilot tax break for them. But the manner in which they did it has caused all kinds of problems. And now today was the advocacy group, the Louisiana Bucket Brigade, has filed a lawsuit to challenge the legality of that tax break.
Okay.
So that's just,
Another
gonna
hitch.
go on and on.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
The judge in a hugely consequential federal case that will decide whether short-term rentals are legal or not in the city of New Orleans said on December 20th that a ruling would be coming within a few days. It's more than a month later, and it's still crickets. Everyone's wondering what's going on with that.
Still wondering. All right. Wrap it up.
Yeah, and I'll be following from afar the death of this Gretna 17-year-old, born and raised in Gretna. He went with his Palestinian American, went with his family back to the Israeli-occupied West Bank and was killed there last weekend. But we're following a lot of the Associated Press reporting from that on the ground.
Okay. We'll be looking for that. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.